Hello and welcome to another edition of Legislative Update. My name is Tom Ayres. I'm the senior staff writer with the Vermont Standard newspaper in Woodstock, and this program is produced in collaboration with our friends at Okemo Valley TV. As always, my guest is State Legislator Charlie Kimbell from Woodstock, representing Woodstock, Reading, and Plymouth in the Vermont House. And it's good to see you again, Charlie. Things are
Nice to see you,
winding
Tom.
down. Things are winding down in this legislative session.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a mix. It's winding down and it's winding up all at the same time.
that's what happens in the waning weeks, though, right? It looks like
Yes.
it looks like the legislature will remain in session through the end of the month and possibly into the early part of June. You're at
Right.
the stage now where the Senate and the House are working together to reconcile differing pieces of legislation on key issues that have come to fore in this session. Can you talk a little bit about how that conference process works and that reconciliation process works that you're in right now?
Sure. Yeah, what happens is that when one of the houses, there's the House of Representatives and the Senate, passes a bill, it passes it over to the other body. So that bill could originate in the House, it could originate in the Senate. And then the body to receive it then will look at it to see if they agree with it. Most likely they'll amend it and they'll send it back to the other body as amended. And so, and then the one that receives it back can agree to further amend it and then send it back and go back and forth like a ping pong game. Or they can say, you know what, let's agree that we're not going to accept their amendment and ask for a conference committee of conference. And that
Okay.
is to reconcile the two different versions of the same bill. And the three members of each body are appointed, and then they get together and they look at really a side by side comparison of the bills. So a good example of this is the budget, and this is the general fund budget, which is about $9 billion. And what the House always originates the bill, and then sends it over to the Senate. I think that it was by March 21st of this year. They send it to the Senate. The Senate marks it up and says, yeah, we agree with this. And they go through a process where they identify those things that they like to have different and they amend it and they send it back. So when that happened this year, the House, knowing this was coming, said, let's call for a committee of conference. And so the three members of the House and the three members of the Senate have been meeting over the past week and a half, I think. And they've been meeting with Joint Fiscal Office, which helps them compare the numbers in the two budgets. And they really negotiate each point to say, we agree on this one. Okay, that's good. Let's move on to the next one. Let's go agree on the next one, and then move on. And when they come up to an agreement that they can sign off on, and two of the three members of each house has to sign off saying they approve it, not all three, just two of the three. Then it goes back to the both bodies to approve. And it's not debatable, it's not amendable. When the House gets a conference committee, it's either yes or no. And the same thing in the Senate. So that's the process. And right now, the budget, I think we're going to look at it this week, which is unusual. Usually the budget is the last thing to be passed. And this year, the budget will be passed, but we still have some other bills outstanding, such as the education appropriation.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So a little bit more about those three members from each body that are appointed to these conference committee. Um, is one of them chosen from the House and Senate leadership, and are the others chosen because their committees, for example, are the primary committees who oversaw those pieces of legislation in development? How does that work?
Yeah, it's usually the leadership of the committee that was responsible for passing that particular piece of legislation. So with the budget, for instance, it's the chairperson, the vice chair, and the ranking member, the three top members on the House side, and the same on the Senate side. In other bills, there's multi jurisdictions. So we fully anticipate having a conference committee on the Education Transformation Bill. And that's going to include members of the House Education Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee, not just one of them. So, and those people are chosen by the Speaker. On the Senate side, the members of the conference committee are chosen by the Committee on Committees, which is the President Pro Tem, Lieutenant Governor, and also the other at-large member that's elected to it.
Okay.
So those are the three people that are chosen to select that Committee on Committees. Actually,
The
I think
Committee on Committees is one of my favorite committees.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they do have a lot of influence because who
Yeah,
gets to
yeah,
sit on those conference committees is really, really critical. And usually the people that are named to those committees have to have voted for the bill. You know, it's not like you're going to put somebody that has voted against the bill on a conference committee.
right, exactly.
So that's the idea because otherwise they're just going to try to sink it anyway.
And just by
Um,
the way the process works, it sounds like by its very nature, it becomes a bipartisan conference too, generally speaking.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
important to have members of both parties represented so that they can tie in their members of their caucus
absolutely.
and inform their what's going on. Yeah, otherwise it's not it wouldn't do very well when they bring it back to the full house saying you guys never included us, so all that kind of stuff. So
So you've mentioned the budget. What are one or two other examples of major pieces of legislation that are currently in the Committee of Conference process?
well, one is a capital bill, and that's the state's annual bonds that go out to fund state properties and improvements. So that is also in conference. There's the transportation bill, which is also, I think they've been meeting for about a week as well. And that handles all of the areas of transportation. Um, so those are three that are going on. One was just called for, and that is on the tax credits that the Senate passed a bill on a tax credit package. It was passed
Hmm.
over to the House. We took it and we stripped it of everything that was in the bill and put all the stuff that we had voted on earlier in the session, including a new part, which is an exemption for military retirement pay. And have sent that back over to the Senate. They got it and said, "Oh, this is not what we sent over. We need a conference committee." So on Friday, they voted that as to we want to form a conference committee. They named the three members, and tomorrow the House will be doing the same.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's a $13.5 million bundle of different tax credits and tax exemptions.
Okay.
So the big one will be the education transformation bill. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure who's going to be on that conference committee. That's a big parlor game. It's like who's going to be on it. We know two of the people. We don't know the third.
Hmm. Hmm. Wanted to take a little bit of a tangent here, and you and I chatted about this during the course of the last couple of days. And that is legislation that sort of lingers in committee, gets introduced in January, it lingers in committee for months, 2 months, and then all of a sudden, in the waning weeks of the legislature, it's back on the docket of the committees again. The example I would use is the attempt on both the part of the Senate and members of the Senate and the House to legislate a school cell phone usage ban or restrictions.
Yeah.
Uh, it spent the better part of last week in the House Education Committee. It was marked up on Friday. What's up with these late breaking kinds of pieces of legislation that suddenly they're dormant for weeks and then all of a sudden it's,
Yeah.
hurry up and wait.
There are a couple of things that work here. One is that bill was actually introduced last year as well, and it didn't make it through the legislative process.
Okay.
So this year, the advocates behind it did a very good job of making sure that it was introduced in both the House and the Senate with the same exact language, and worked at really lining up people to sponsor it. But it wasn't taken up early enough for it to make crossover. So neither body passed it out of their house in order to be officially considered by the other body for the session. So what we've got going on now is that the House Education Committee really did a major lift of this education transformation bill, and they have time. And they have time to really take it up now and consider it. And so that's what they're doing. And
Hmm.
so either with the prospect of um, really moving it forward for next legislative session, because bills can live over the 2 years in a biennium, or the very remote possibility that it could be included in one of these as an amendment to a bill that gets passed back and forth that had made that crossover requirement. So there's that. It wouldn't go to a conference committee. The difficulty is in a conference committee, what we had talked about earlier, you can't really consider anything that wasn't already in either one of the bills that you're trying to then reconcile.
Okay,
You
right.
know, so if there's an opportunity for a bill to be passed from the Senate back to the House and the House votes that bill out, then they can attach something to that and then send it back in time. So it's really at this point in the session, you're looking for that vehicle. You
Right.
can say that we did that with the tax credit bill. The House did that because the bill we had been working on earlier in the session didn't make it out of the House. So that this gave us an opportunity to attach it to a Senate bill and then send it back.
I see.
So there's a little gamesmanship that goes on. There's always someone will say this is not germane to the bill that we're getting back and that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
you have to be really careful to make sure that it's relevant to
Hmm.
the bill that comes with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's touch then on, in closing, on a subject that has been woven throughout our discussions during this session here on Legislative Update. You mentioned it earlier, education transformation. Where does that stand right now? As I understand it, it has not come out of the Senate. Is that correct?
That is correct. Um, so we sent this over. I can't even remember the day it was. I think it was at the end of March.
Hmm.
But so the Senate Education Committee voted out of their committee, and it has to be considered by the Senate Finance Committee, which looks at all of the financial implications. The Senate Education Committee drastically changed many of the provisions that we had in the bill. There's no minimum class size standards, no targeted school sizes. They are a lot more liberal in the sense of using tuition dollars to go to private schools, both in state and out of state, than ours. They changed the funding formula that we had in there. They left the school construction piece in there, which was great. I was very thankful for that. And they changed the way the district boundaries are going to be shaped. They basically named a pure legislative committee where we had a lot of folks that have been working in the superintendent's offices, and so that changed.
Hmm.
That is now in Senate Finance, and they're looking at the money parts of it. They've got a schedule to look at all of that this week again. Another week of testimony from different people within the Joint Fiscal Office and Legislative Council and some consultants on the foundation formula. And they have their own idea of what that should look like. So they need to vote it out by the end of this week. And we anticipate it's going to be significantly different than what we passed. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so we've been trying to track it, but until they actually vote it out, we can't do much. We
Right.
can, jump up and down and scream and yell and say this is not the way that we want it. But until that we have possession of it, there's not much we can do.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what we're waiting for. And what the Senate Education Committee advanced is significantly different from both what the House wanted and I think also what the administration wanted. So that's where it may not be in a form right now that it could survive.
Can you speculate as to whether the House version or the Senate version, as they're currently constituted, are more in line with the administration, or are they
Yeah,
both pretty divergent?
have to play that game all the time. It's like does
Right.
and so there are conversations happening all the time. It's like, would you let what we've passed become law? Are you excited about it? So there's those conversations going on all the time and those considerations so that we're not wasting our time or the rest of the
Absolutely.
legislature or the state's
Absolutely.
time. Yeah,
So this issue is very clearly headed the way it sounds to a committee of conference.
I think
Almost
so.
certainly.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and a lot of times committees of conference, well, I wouldn't say a lot of times, but it's not unheard of that a committee of conference can't come to an agreement.
Hmm.
And so what happens at that point is the bill dies. Um, and that would be a lot of time and effort and everything expended for no results for one session. I mean,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean we couldn't bring it up again in the following session, which is a possibility, but I'd hate for that to have happen after we've devoted so much. And in the end, it's we want to make sure we're doing the right thing for the kids in the school
Right.
system,
Right.
and to affect some real impact on the property tax rates, all that. But I think there's been a lot of energy, emotion, and thought process, a lot of learning going on in the last session. So I'm hopeful that we can get something across.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
paths are so divergent. So we'll see.
Well, at the outset of this session back in January, people on all sides of the issue, lawmakers, the governor, education advocates, have stressed that this was the number one most critical issue for the legislature to deal with and the governor to deal with in this session. So
Yeah,
um, I would I would expect there will be a great deal of consternation and backlash if something isn't delivered.
for
Uh,
sure. No, I totally agree with you, and we'll see what that looks like.
yeah.
And the conference committee is always interesting in a conference committee because they do put out a side by side. So you really literally have a spreadsheet, and each section of the bill of each bill is printed right next to one another, so you can see clearly where the differences are. And that process of going through. So there could be areas on which we have total agreement, and there could be areas in which there's significant disagreement. And so you start saying, okay, we agreed all these things. Okay, now let's just focus on the ones that we don't. And if we can get movement on those things that we have significant disagreement on, then hopefully we'll get to a compromise that everybody can be, supportive of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we will continue to follow this over the course of the next several weeks. I anticipate that projection of the legislative session continuing into early June is probably a pretty correct one, and this may be a big part of the reason why. So we'll stay on top of it together in the coming sessions of legislative update. Charlie,
All
thanks
right.
so much,
My
and
pleasure. Thanks again, Tom.
look forward to catching up with you next week here on Legislative Update. My name
Mhm.
is Tom Ayres, Senior Staff Writer for the Vermont Standard newspaper in Woodstock. My guest has been State Representative Charlie Kimbell, as is the case every week here on Legislative Update. And this program is produced in collaboration with our friends at Okemo Valley TV. We'll see you next week.